A brief history of modern Singapore for political risk analysts. Colonial Singapore and World War One. During World War One, Singapore was part of the British Empire and served as a strategic naval base and trading hub. Although far from the European front lines, the war had ripple effects on Singapore's economy and society. The most notable local incident was the 1915 Sepoy Mutiny, when Indian Muslim soldiers in the British Army rebelled due to grievances linked to the war and religious sensitivities. British and Allied forces crushed the revolt, but it exposed the fragile loyalty of colonial troops. Interwar years and World War II. In the 1920s and 1930s, Britain invested heavily in making Singapore a key part of its Fortress Singapore defense strategy. A large naval base was built to project power in Asia and to deter Japanese expansion. However, during World War II, this strategy failed dramatically. In February 1942, Japanese forces invaded Malaya and swiftly defeated British defenses, culminating in the fall of Singapore. British Prime Minister Winston Churchill called it the worst disaster in British military history. Singapore was renamed Seonantou under brutal Japanese occupation from 1942 to 1945, during which tens of thousands, especially ethnic Chinese, were killed in massacres such as Suk Ching. Post-war recovery and the rise of nationalism from 1945 to 1959. After Japan's surrender in 1945, Singapore returned to British control, but the myth of British invincibility had been shattered. The post-war period brought hardship, food shortages, unemployment, strikes, and political ferment. A new generation of local leaders had emerged, demanding self-rule. The Labour Front and later the People's Action Party, or the PAP, led by Lee Kuan Yew, became dominant forces. The British introduced limited self-government in 1955 and full internal self-rule in 1959, with Lee becoming the first prime minister. Merger with Malaysia and sudden independence from 1963 to 1965. In 1963, Singapore joined the Federation of Malaysia, hoping to gain economic and political stability. However, ideological differences between the PAP and Malaysia's ruling party, the UMNO, combined with racial tensions between Malays and Chinese, led to violent riots in 1964. In August 1965, after just 2 years, Singapore was expelled from Malaysia. This unplanned independence thrust Singapore into a perilous position, a small resource-poor island with no natural hinterland, surrounded by larger and often unfriendly neighbors. Nation building under Lee Kuan Yew. From 1965 to 1990, Lee Kuan Yew's government moved swiftly to secure Singapore's survival. The PAP pursued pragmatic policies emphasizing meritocracy, efficiency, and zero tolerance for corruption. Multiracial harmony, laws, and institutions were designed to balance ethnic interests and prevent sectarian violence. Economic growth through industrialization. The Economic Development Board, or the EDB, attracted foreign investment. Public housing and infrastructure. Over 80% of Singaporeans eventually lived in government-built Housing Development Board, or HDB, flats. Singapore built up the Singapore Armed Forces, or the SAF, signed defense agreements with countries like the UK and Israel, and maintained tight political control. Though often criticized as authoritarian, the model delivered exceptional stability and growth. By the 1980s, Singapore was one of Asia's four tigers, with a robust manufacturing base, port infrastructure, and rising middle class. Transition and economic diversification from 1990 to 2004. In 1990, Lee Kuan Yew stepped down after 31 years in power, succeeded by Goh Chok Tong, Under Go, Singapore maintained its trajectory while becoming more consultative and open to limited political reforms. The country diversified into high-tech industries, finance, and services. However, challenges such as the 1997 Asian financial crisis tested Singapore's resilience. It weathered the storm with prudent fiscal policy and economic reserves. In 2004, Lee Kuan Yew's son, became prime minister, marking a generational transition while maintaining PAP continuity. Global City and New Challenges from 2004 to 2019. Under Lee Long, Singapore enhanced its global role. It became a leading financial hub for Asia, a center for biomedical research, tech, and education, a key player in ASEAN, balancing ties with China, the US, and India. The government invested heavily in sustainability, public transport, and digital governance. Singapore hosted the historic 2018 Trump-Kim summit, showcasing its neutrality and diplomacy. Yet challenges mounted: rising cost of living, an aging population, income inequality, and foreign labor tensions. Demands for greater political freedom, especially among younger generations or younger citizens. Opposition parties gained some ground in parliamentary elections, notably in 2011 and 2020, though the PAP retained dominance. Singapore in 2025. Stability with caution. By 2025, Singapore remains one of the world's most efficient and secure countries. It is ranked among the top globally in education, infrastructure, and public health, a model of urban sustainability with green buildings, electric transport, and water recycling, a digital leader embracing artificial intelligence, smart city technologies, and fintech. However, the political system remains tightly controlled, with the PAP still in power. Critics argue for more pluralism and civic space. The government has made limited concessions, such as opposition representation in parliament and controlled online dissent. Foreign policy remains pragmatic, balancing relations with China and the United States while asserting ASEAN centrality. Singapore continues to punch above its weight diplomatically, economically, and technologically. Conclusion: Singapore's journey from a colonial port to a sophisticated sovereign city state is extraordinary. From wartime trauma and forced independence to global admiration for its clean governance and economic prowess, Singapore's history is a study in resilience, pragmatism, and controlled evolution. By 2025, Singapore stands as a model for small states navigating a volatile world. Economically agile, socially cohesive, and strategically shrewd, yet constantly negotiating between control and openness, tradition and innovation.